Welcome to our deep dive into the life of Imam Ali. You've asked to understand this pivotal figure, his life, his character, and the impact he had. And these excerpts that you shared with us offer some incredible insights. We're going to unpack these sources and hopefully reveal the man behind the legend.
Yes, we have excerpts that are focused on Islamic history and religious figures, and these provide a unique lens through which we can understand how Imam Ali was perceived and revered within his own tradition.
So instead of just listing facts, our mission is to really bring Imam Ali to life, uncover the personality and principles that made him such a compelling figure, even centuries later. And I think a great place to start would be with these fascinating titles given to him called kunyas.
Yeah, kunyas are an important part of Arabic and Islamic culture. They're honorific titles that go beyond just simple nicknames. They often reflect a person's character or family relationships, even future roles.
And some of the kunyas given to Imam Ali are really intriguing, especially those bestowed by the Prophet Muhammad himself. For example, we have Abu Rayhanatain, meaning father of the two Basils, referring to his sons Hassan and Hussein.
And this kunya wasn't merely about fatherhood. You see, the Prophet Muhammad predicted that Hassan and Hussein would become leaders of great significance, calling them the two chiefs of the youths of paradise. So the title, Father of the Two Basils, it kind of foreshadowed their future importance.
It almost makes you wonder if those around Ali sensed his sons' destinies from a young age, even as children. Now, here's another kunya that really caught my attention, Abu Turab, meaning father of dust. Which, I mean, come on, that sounds a little odd, right?
It does seem unusual at first. The story goes that this kunya was given to Ali by the Prophet Muhammad. And on one occasion, Ali was feeling a little left out because the Prophet was forming these bonds of brotherhood between the companions. And so the Prophet reassured Ali, saying, "Does it not please you that your standing with me is the same as Aaron's standing to Moses?" And he went on to explain that Ali's unique position would involve challenges and hardships, symbolized by dust.
So father of dust wasn't an insult, but more like a recognition of the trials that Ali would face, almost like a foreshadowing of his destiny.
Exactly.
Interesting. And there are other kunyas too, like Abu Hassan and Abu Hussein.
Yes, these reinforce his role as a father
Right.
and the high regard that his lineage, his family had. It wasn't just about family connections. It was about legacy and Ali's place in a larger spiritual narrative.
It's incredible how much meaning is packed into these titles. They weren't just labels, they're glimpses into the character and destiny of Imam Ali.
And speaking of glimpses, I found it fascinating that Ali was actually raised by the Prophet Muhammad himself. That must have had a profound impact on him, especially considering he embraced Islam at such a young age.
Absolutely. Imagine being raised in the Prophet's household. Witnessing the revelations of Islam firsthand, learning from the source. Ali's early and unwavering acceptance of Islam, even before many adults, it speaks volumes about how profound that upbringing was.
It wasn't just passive observation, though, right? The sources include these specific anecdotes that reveal Ali's character, even as a child. For instance, there's this story about a young Ali, and he uses the word I in a way that suggests pride. And the Prophet gently corrects him, emphasizing the importance of humility. That's a great example of how those formative years shaped Ali's values. And what's interesting is that this commitment to humility stayed with him throughout his life. Even later as caliph, and just for our listeners who might not be familiar, that means the leader of the Muslim community, even as caliph, Ali continued to live by those principles. There's a story about him refusing special treatment and insisting on paying for food that was offered to his army.
It's those seemingly small actions that really reveal a person's true character. And in Ali's case, they paint a picture of a man deeply committed to justice and equality. I think many people tend to only focus on Imam Ali's image as this great warrior.
Yes, he's often depicted as a fierce fighter,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. However, the sources that we are looking at reveal a much more multifaceted individual.
Right. That's what I found so intriguing. The excerpts highlight his role as a scribe, which is not as widely known. This suggests a level of intellect and literacy that goes beyond just the battlefield.
Literacy was crucial in the early days of Islam, and Ali played a vital role in recording the Prophet's revelations and important treaties. He was essentially preserving the foundations of Islamic law and governance.
And not just any treaties. I mean, we're talking about significant treaties, like the Pact of Hudaybiyah. This was a critical agreement between the Prophet and the Quraysh tribe, and Ali was the one entrusted to document that.
He was more than just a scribe. He was a trusted confidant, privy to sensitive information, and someone who was playing an active role in shaping the course of early Islam.
So we have this image of Ali as a skilled warrior, but also a man of knowledge, entrusted with preserving and shaping the very foundations of Islam. It makes you wonder what other facets of his character are waiting to be uncovered.
What's really fascinating is that the sources hint at even more complexities within his personality. We see this incredibly strong figure, capable figure, but we also get these glimpses of deep compassion and piety.
It sounds like there's so much more to discover about Imam Ali. Beyond the battlefield and the role of the scribe, his character seems to be full of these intriguing contrasts.
Absolutely. The sources offer a rich tapestry of stories and insights that help us understand the man behind the legend. We see the warrior, the intellectual, and now hints of this deeply spiritual side.
I can't wait to delve further into these sources and really explore these contrasting elements of his personality. We'll continue our deep dive in the next part. Reading through these excerpts, I was really struck by how much they emphasize his early years with the Prophet Muhammad. It's like those formative experiences really laid the groundwork for everything that came after.
Yeah. You're right. It wasn't just exposure to the teachings, he was immersed in it. He grew up in the very household where those revelations were first received.
Imagine witnessing those pivotal moments firsthand. I mean, the sources even suggest that he had glimpses of the divine light of revelation, even before the prophet began his public preaching. It's as though he had access to this deeper understanding of Islam even from a young age.
It really speaks to a sense of destiny, of him being chosen for a very unique purpose. And that theme of him having this very special relationship with the prophet, it continues to emerge as we go through these sources.
Like, for instance, there's the story of the Brotherhood Pact. When the prophet was pairing up the companions and Ali felt left out because he wasn't included, but the prophet explained that their bond transcended any earthly comparison, even likening it to the relationship between Moses and Aaron.
Right. That's an incredibly powerful analogy, and it's reflected in the way that Ali served the prophet, not just as a follower, but as a confidant, as a devoted assistant. He would literally help the prophet stand and sit, tending to his needs with complete devotion.
That level of dedication goes beyond just simple duty. It speaks to a deep love and respect for the prophet. And that reverence is evident in the supplications that Ali wrote, praising the prophet's character and mission.
Yeah, those supplications are incredibly moving. They offer a glimpse into Ali's own spiritual depth. They're not just formal prayers, they're heartfelt expressions of admiration and awe.
And beyond that spiritual side, we see this fascinating intersection of intellect and faith in his role as a scribe. I mean, it's really mind-boggling to think that he was responsible for documenting so many of the prophet's revelations, treaties, agreements.
Think about it. He was literally writing down the words that would become the bedrock of Islamic law and governance. It speaks volumes about his intellect, his trustworthiness, and his central role within that early Muslim community.
He wasn't just passively transcribing, though. He was actively involved in these pivotal moments. Like during the documentation of the Pact of Hudaybiyah, that crucial treaty between the Prophet and the Quraysh. Initially, Ali wrote down the phrase, Muhammad, the messenger of God, but the Quraysh objected.
Yeah, they argued that if they acknowledged Muhammad's prophethood, then there would be no need for negotiations. So the Prophet asked Ali to erase the phrase.
But Ali refused. He said he couldn't bear to erase those words. It's such a poignant detail that reveals his unwavering faith and that depth of reverence for the Prophet's mission.
It's a testament to his conviction, even in the face of political pressure. And ultimately, the Prophet himself ended up erasing the phrase to ensure the treaty's success.
So even in these seemingly mundane tasks, we see these glimpses of Ali's character, his intellect, his piety, and his unwavering commitment to the Prophet's message. But the sources also highlight another aspect of his personality: his physical strength and courage. This is a man who, even as a child, defended the Prophet from those who harassed him.
Absolutely. And as an adult, his bravery on the battlefield became legendary. He fought in all the major battles alongside the Prophet, defending the nascent Muslim community with incredible valor.
I mean, some of the descriptions of his swordsmanship are almost poetic. Swift, decisive, a true force to be reckoned with. There are stories about him taking on multiple opponents single-handedly, his courage inspiring his comrades and striking fear into the hearts of his enemies.
But his strength wasn't limited to just physical prowess. Ali also possessed incredible mental fortitude, a steadfast commitment to justice, and remarkable patience in the face of adversity.
He certainly faced his share of hardship. I mean, losing both the Prophet and his wife, Fatima, within a short span of time. That must have been an unimaginable burden of grief.
Yeah, it's a testament to his character that even in his personal sorrow, he continued to serve the Muslim community. He offered his wisdom and guidance to those in power. Umar, the second caliph, even acknowledged Ali's vital role, saying, had it not been for Ali, Umar would have perished.
He put his own pain aside to support and guide others. And even when he finally became caliph himself, it wasn't exactly a smooth or easy path for him.
Not at all. Ali inherited a community that was already fractured, riddled with internal conflicts, facing external threats.
And honestly, those who held power before him hadn't set a great example. They accumulated wealth, showed favoritism to their families, and created a system that benefited the elite at the expense of the common people.
And Ali, with his unwavering belief in justice and equality, he tried to change that. He redistributed wealth, spoke out against corruption, and he championed the rights of the poor and marginalized. It's no wonder he made some powerful enemies in the process.
The sources describe him as austere, refusing to indulge in luxury while others suffered. It reminds me of that story about him wearing a patched cloak, and this merchant tries to give him a discount, assuming he couldn't afford better clothes.
And Ali refused the discount, saying he wasn't ashamed of his simple attire. It's such a powerful statement about his humility and his rejection of material wealth.
It embodies the idea of a true servant leader, someone who lives among the people, shares their struggles, and never places himself above them. No wonder he's still revered as a symbol of justice and righteousness.
But his unwavering commitment to those principles also made him a target.
Yeah, and that's where things start to get really interesting. Ali's reign was marked by conflict and violence. So we left off talking about Imam Ali inheriting this fractured community, trying to reform a system that wasn't exactly built on fairness. It seems like his commitment to justice, as admirable as it was, might have made him some pretty serious enemies.
Yeah, Ali's attempts to really reshape that political landscape, they weren't welcomed by everyone, especially those who had benefited from the previous system. You have to understand, the position of caliph, it held immense religious and political authority in the early Muslim community. So challenging the status quo was going to lead to tensions.
So we're not just talking about disagreements or debates, right? The sources actually describe full-blown armed conflicts during his time as caliph.
Exactly. There were two major conflicts, the Battle of the Camel and the Battle of Siffin. And both of these battles, they reveal a lot about the challenges that Ali faced, the complexities of leadership during that era.
Okay, so let's unpack those. First, the Battle of the Camel. I'm curious about the name. What's the significance of the camel?
Well, the camel in question belonged to Aisha. She was one of the Prophet Muhammad's wives, and she opposed Ali's leadership, and she actually rallied a significant force against him.
Wow, so Ali had to face an army led by someone who was deeply respected within the community, someone who had been close to the Prophet. What a difficult position to be in.
It highlights the deep divisions that existed within the Muslim community at that time. Ali was trying to navigate this political and religious landscape, and it was still very much in flux, with different interpretations of Islam and leadership emerging.
And to add another layer of complexity, Aisha was a figure who commanded respect and influence. It wasn't just a political battle, it was a clash that involved these deeply personal and religious elements.
Right. And Ali ultimately emerged victorious in the Battle of the Camel, but it came at a cost. It deepened those existing rifts and demonstrated just how volatile the situation really was.
I can only imagine the toll that kind of conflict would take on a leader. And then, of course, there's the Battle of Siffin, which I understand was even more intense. What led to that confrontation?
The Battle of Siffin pitted Ali against Muawiyah. He was the governor of Syria. And Muawiyah also challenged Ali's legitimacy as caliph. And this conflict represented a major power struggle within the Muslim world.
Muawiyah wasn't someone to be underestimated. He had a large and well-equipped army, and from what I gather, he wasn't afraid to use some pretty ruthless tactics.
That's right. The sources describe a moment during the Battle of Siffin where Muawiyah's forces cut off access to the water supply for Ali's army. It was a brutal strategy, essentially trying to force them into submission through dehydration.
That's just brutal, especially considering the climate and the importance of water in that region. How did Ali respond to a tactic like that?
Ali's troops did eventually regain control of the water source. But what's really remarkable is that when his companions urged him to retaliate in kind, to deny water to Muawiyah's army, Ali refused. He said that he would never stoop to using those same methods.
Even in the heat of battle, facing an enemy who showed no mercy, Ali held fast to his principles. He refused to compromise his sense of justice, even when it might have given him a tactical advantage.
It shows this deep sense of morality, a belief that even in war, there are lines that you just don't cross. And this decision, I think, reveals a lot about Ali's character, about his leadership style. He was a leader trying to uphold a higher standard of conduct, even in the most difficult circumstances.
It's an incredible example of someone leading by example,
Yeah.
refusing to abandon his values, even when surrounded by all this conflict and brutality. Makes me think about how some leaders, even today, compromise their morals for victory.
It's a timeless dilemma, right? All these actions raise these important questions about the nature of power, the ethics of warfare, the compromises leaders sometimes feel compelled to make.
It's almost as if Ali believed that true victory wasn't just about winning on the battlefield. It was about maintaining that moral integrity, even in the face of adversity. But adhering to such a strict code of conduct, I mean, that couldn't have been easy, especially in that political climate.
You're absolutely right. It was a difficult path. And it's important to remember that even with his commitment to justice, Ali still faced criticism, opposition.
It makes you realize that leadership is rarely straightforward, you know? There are always tough decisions, compromises, and that constant pressure to balance competing interests.
And those challenges were especially pronounced for Ali given the time period in which he led. That early Muslim community was still figuring itself out, its identity, its political structure, its place in the world.
It must have been incredibly complex, so demanding, and from what we've seen so far, he seems to have approached that responsibility with this deep sense of purpose, a commitment to his ideals, even when those ideals made him a target.
And those ideals, that unwavering commitment to justice, fairness, compassion, they continue to shape his actions, even in the face of opposition and violence.
It makes you wonder how those values played out in his interactions with his enemies. Did he show that same compassion and fairness to those who opposed him?
That's a great question. And it reveals another fascinating dimension of his character. The sources offer some intriguing examples of how he treated those who challenged his leadership.
I'm curious to hear more about that. Did his actions match his words? Did he extend that same sense of justice and mercy to his opponents?
Well, there's a story about Marwan, one of Ali's most vocal critics.
Hmm.
And he was actually captured during a battle. And despite Marwan's relentless opposition, this guy was a threat. Ali chose to pardon him and let him go free.
Wow, that's incredible. To show such leniency to someone who actively sought to undermine his leadership, it really speaks volumes about Ali's commitment to mercy, even in the face of betrayal.
It's a powerful example of his belief in forgiveness, in second chances. And it's not an isolated incident either. The sources mention that after defeating Aisha in the Battle of the Camel, Ali ensured her safe return home, even providing her with provisions for the journey.
It's like he was constantly striving to take the higher moral ground, even when dealing with those who had wronged him.
It's a testament to his character and a reminder that true leadership isn't just about wielding power. It's about demonstrating compassion and integrity, even in those most challenging situations.
It makes you wonder how someone like that navigated the treacherous world of politics, especially during such a volatile period. Seems like those unwavering principles might have put him at odds with the realities of power and leadership.
You're right. Ali's commitment to justice and fairness, it often clashed with the political machinations and power struggles of his time. And unfortunately, his adherence to those principles ultimately had tragic consequences.
You're talking about his assassination.
Sadly, yes, Ali's life was cut short by a Khawarij assassin while he was praying in a mosque.
And remind me again, who were the Khawarij?
They were a group who had initially supported Ali, but then they broke away because they believed that he had compromised his principles by agreeing to arbitration during a conflict. And those extreme views, it led them to reject his authority and, tragically, to carry out his assassination.
It's a stark reminder of the dangers of extremism, the devastating impact that it can have, even on those who are most committed to justice and peace.
A heartbreaking end to a life dedicated to upholding truth and righteousness. But even in his death, Ali's legacy endures. His teachings, his example of courage and compassion, that unwavering commitment to justice, those have become cornerstones of Islamic thought. And they continue to influence Muslims around the world today.
It's almost like his martyrdom amplified his message, transforming him into this symbol of unwavering faith, righteous struggle, and sacrifice in the face of oppression.
Exactly. Ali's story reminds us that true leadership isn't just about holding a position of power. It's about living by your principles, serving others, and striving to create a more just and compassionate world, even when faced with immense challenges.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Imam Ali, I'm left with a sense of awe and inspiration. This was a man who navigated a complex world with strength, intellect, and unwavering integrity.
He was a warrior, a scholar, a leader, and a man of deep faith. And while his story is filled with both triumphs and tragedies, it ultimately offers us a timeless reminder of the enduring power of principles, the importance of justice, and the need for compassion and leadership, even in the face of adversity.
It's a legacy that continues to resonate centuries later, challenging us to live with purpose and strive for a more just and equitable world.